If you weren't aware, this is Zilog and Moto. Today, we're back to doing a normal review as opposed to last week's comparison between EA Hockey and NHL Hockey. And in fact, we can't compare this week's game to another version of itself, as this is the only version that exists. That's right, unlike similar FMV games like Corpse Killer or Fahrenheit, which both appeared in regular 32X versions, or Sewer Shark, which was later ported to the 3DO, Ground Zero Texas ended up being a Sega CD exclusive. Ground Zero Texas was made by Digital Pictures and released in November of 1993, and it's one of the later releases by Digital Pictures that did not get a 32X or higher makeover. Looking at their release list, it seems like that 1994 was when they really started trying to produce content for the 32-bit era as well, with only major sellers like Sewer Shark or Night Trap getting re-released. For this game, Digital Pictures reportedly shot about 110 minutes of footage to be used in the game. That seems like a lot when you first hear it, as most feature-length movies are about that length, but once you start playing the game, you'll see that it condenses down pretty quickly, as more than likely a lot of that time is used during action sequences that you shoot through. I would say playing the game feels closer to an hour-long episode of an action TV show. The film sequences were directed by Dwight Little, who had actually done a few movies at that point in his career, most notably Marked for Death and work on the Halloween series, and would continue on for a few films before transitioning into television for the last 20 or so years. Due to the amount of footage in the game, actually comes in 2 discs, as opposed to, say, Sewer Shark's only 1. And I've got to say, it does feel like a slightly longer game. Slightly. However, is it twice as good as Sewer Shark for double the data? Yeah, let's just get to the review, shall we? Here's our first look at a traditional Sega CD case. If you remember, Sewer Shark was either a pack-in release in a jewel case or a full-size cardboard box, due to being one of the first 22 or so Sega CD releases. I can't remember exactly how many it is. After those first Sega CD releases, they switched to this format. I couldn't find an exact name for these cases, but I have seen referred to as long box jewel cases, as they're similar to a standard CD jewel case, but obviously much larger. This case specifically is intact. No cracks or anything. And that's a good thing, because since it's a double CD game, I'm not sure if the insert for the second disc would fit in a replacement case. If you're not aware, due to the size and weight of these style cases, the hinges, like down here and right here, they've got a bad habit of breaking. The cover has some nice artwork. And is actually somewhat game accurate, depicting what happens if you lose the game. I really like the nice detail of the city population side, on the side of the road. You can barely make it out there. And it has the actual name of the city written in it. Also, if you look at the year, it's got up here, 1995 on the license plate. So it's one of these games where the story is written slightly in the future, as sci-fi titles often are. Small details, but good ones. Down at the bottom, you'll see that the game has a VRC rating of MA13. And I can kind of understand why that rating is there, just due to the fact that you spend the entire game shooting either aliens, alien stormtroopers, or aliens that have taken the form of humans, but there's no real blood, just bodies flying back and forth across the screen after being hit by energy blasts. I guess I could see that rating for teens, but honestly, it's a pretty clean game, and I don't remember a single curse word in any of the video sequences. The back is pretty straightforward, with just the game logo again at the top, and some good screenshots for the game, right there. But it's in a slightly tricky manner. If you notice here, these bottom two, they show the HUD, but these top 2 screenshots, there's no border around the screen. That means that these top 2 are cropped in, so these are not really indicative of in-game footage since they've been cropped in. Um, it's a minor thing, but it's slightly false advertising if you want to be specific. As we open the case, you'll immediately see that second disc insert that I was referring to. And this thing can be a bit of a pain, but as you see, it slides right in here on this first page here. And if you look closely at the edges, you'll see where there's 4 tabs where it snaps in place in the case. Like I said, that's this stuff here. This is what I'd be worried about not having on a replacement case, where that wouldn't snap in. But maybe they would. I don't know. I haven't bought any replacement cases yet. And you know, these tabs are really fragile. They're very small. So this thing's going to pop out a bit. It's just going to happen, especially when you're trying to get the manual behind here. And we'll do that just now. And this is going to be tricky to try to get out. I'm going to try to, yeah, see, I just popped that back out there. And this is, fortunately, this is kind of poor design. It just is. But I'll try to I'll just leave that out for now. We'll snap that back in later. Anyway, manual is in decent shape on the outside anyway. In the end here, though, you can see, I don't know if this is water damage, if it's somehow got folded or something. Basically, from here to the back, it looks like it got like bent or something. I'm trying not to bend that any further than I already did. The manual is pretty good, and I like what this happens when there's actual bits of story in the manual that gives the game some extra, you know, feedback and feel and that sort of thing. I really like when they do that sort of thing. And some information about some of the characters that are on your team, that sort of thing, and the various controls, whatever. There's not a whole lot in there, but there doesn't have to be. It's not that complicated a game. It is just basically a shooting gallery game. There are some nice tips, though, also in the back, though. I will point that out. And I'll talk about this later on in the game, but definitely give this, if you're playing this game, give this page a look, because you're going to need to know some of this information. Also, and just a quick note real quick, and I'll discuss this in more detail later, but to assist with this review, I purchased a wireless 8-bit DOE Genesis controller, which you can see here. Now this is specifically the wireless version. I'm not sure, you can kind of see down there, it says the 2.4 gigahertz. There's also a Bluetooth edition that you can use with Bluetooth devices, or buy a separate Bluetooth adapter that you can use for the Genesis. I heard some people say that this one, the wireless version, actually had less latency. And it came with the Genesis adapter, so that was just a choice for me. But I'm sure the Bluetooth one probably works fine as well. We'll go and open it up so you can see what it looks like. It comes with a nice little charging cable and the actual controller, which has the battery built into it. The battery is not removable, but that's the charging port up there. You've got the additional L and R buttons, which I guess you would use if you were playing with a non-Genesis game, and then a couple extra menu buttons here. I know one of these buttons is like a menu button if you're using it with a Mega SG. But the controller just feels good, and you can see how it looks very similar to the layout of the standard 6-button controller. It's very, very solid controller. It comes with a manual and also the little adapter that plugs directly in the Sega port on the front. Back to Ground Zero Texas. The packaging is good, and we already know there's plenty of video segments in the game from a quality director, so let's take a look at the actual game and see if the rest of the game holds up. Well, you can draw a lot of comparisons between, say, Sewer Shark and Ground Zero Texas. They're also quite significantly different games. Ground Zero Texas is not Sewer Shark with different video sequences, to say the least. If you didn't watch the Sewer Shark review and are not familiar with the game, Sewer Shark is what's referred to as a rail shooter. Similar to a game like Virtual Cop or House of the Dead, The actual game involves moving down a set path with the occasional option to choose a different path, and you shoot enemies along that path. Instead, Ground Zero Texas is a stationary shooting gallery that features stationary video shots where you shoot at the action taking place on camera. While part of the game does involve moving between locations, which we'll get to later, due to the way that both the movement takes place, your character doesn't ever actually move. However, both games do involve a combination of video-assisted shooting scenes and separate video cutscenes. The in-game video seems to be slightly better quality than what's in Sewer Shark, but not by much, as there's simply only so much you can do with the 64-color screen limit that the Genesis and Sega CD are limited to. And while both games' video segments are definitely very much B-movie or B-movie-esque, I would say that Ground Zero Texas does have a little more polish to it. But really, how much can you do with a Pod People story? Having said that, Ground Zero Texas does have a few more notable actors than Sewer Shark. Your in-game boss, Reese, is played by Steve Easton, who has an extensive IMDb and is still acting. Your fellow Agent Pike is played by Scott Lawrence, who has a similarly impressive profile. And Reese's second-in-command, DeSalvo, is played by Leslie Zemeckis, wife of Robert Zemeckis. And, well, her career isn't as impressive unless you're into Skinemax type stuff, but this is still kind of a cool thing to see her in before she was famous. Even Danny Trejo shows up supposedly in a minor role. I didn't see him, or if I did, I couldn't tell it was him due to the graininess of the video. I only knew this because his name is in the credits, and I couldn't believe it. He wasn't a huge star yet when this was made, but I checked his IMDb and had forgotten that he was in Marked for Death, which was directed by Dwight Little, if you were paying attention earlier. I'll be interested to see as I go through the rest of the FMV games on the system if I stumble across another star that ended up being as big as he was. The game's basic premise is that you are some sort of tactical operative, that rather than to be placed in the field, you are assigned to monitor 4 cameras at various places around El Cadron, the border town where the alien invasion is taking place. Working with you are 4 other operatives, one in each of the locations around the town, that have attempted to go undercover and figure out what's going on. It's up to you to watch what's happening on the cameras, and defend the operatives and other humans from the alien invasion by shooting guns mounted to the cameras when the aliens make an appearance. For levels 1 and 3, the action taking place on each of the 4 cameras is live, meaning you'll have to switch from camera to camera when prompted that something is occurring on that camera. So not only do you have to keep an eye on the screen, but you also keep an eye on the readout that shows the status of the different cameras and if anything is going on at those locations. Level 2 follows a slightly different format, and Level 4 has you proceed through the 4 locations in order, one after the other, until you've eradicated all of the enemies. Also, during Level 1, at each one of the scenes will be an attempted kidnapping for the operative stationed there, and it's your job to make sure that kidnapping isn't successful. For each of these that you successfully prevent, the operative will find one of 4 codes for a lock that is found in Level 2. It is possible to successfully guess the code for the lock in Level 2, but you only get 1 guess at it per playthrough, and with the total possible combinations of 81, I certainly wouldn't recommend failing more than one of those kidnapping attempts. The cameras that you monitor in levels 1, 3, and 4 each have 10 health. What this means is that when aliens appear on the screen, if you don't hit them before they hit you, they will shoot the camera and will take damage. Get down to 3 health and the camera will flicker between color and black and white, 2 health and everything will turn to black and white, and finally, with only 1 damage left, the screen will become even more pixelated than usual, as it becomes increasingly hard to see enemies on the damaged camera. For levels 1 and 3, assuming your operative in the area hasn't been kidnapped, the cameras can be repaired. You get a total of 2 repairs during a level. Lose the 3rd camera, and it's game over. Oh, and level 4? No repairs, no matter what the screen says. When your camera breaks in level 4, it's time for the tactical nuke from the front cover of the game to drop and blow you and everyone else all to hell. Oh, and that blowing everyone to hell? If you happen to make it to level 4, that's going to happen. A lot. I've done a lot of comparing to this game to Sewer Shark, and to continue that theme, Sewer Shark is an absolute cakewalk compared to Ground Zero Texas. or at least the second half of Ground Zero Texas anyway. The first two levels are pretty straightforward, and I think challenging enough to where you need to pay attention, but not so difficult that you can't enjoy the game, since it's, a game. However, once the action flips to the second disc, the difficulty picks up mightily. You can probably make it through level 3 with enough practice, and to the game's credit, once you've made it past a level, that progress is saved, and you can continue from there rather than going back to the first disc again. But level 4? Oh boy. Level 4.
Looks real bad.
Level 4 is comprised of 4 segments, one in each of the town locations. And the successive nature of the level is why the cameras can't be repaired. Normally with something like this, you would expect each of the segments to be about the same difficulty, or perhaps have the difficulty ramp up as you get to the end of the game.
I don't like this.
Ground Zero Texas?
Keep your eyes open.
Nope. The first segment is brutally hard, meaning that usually you die and have to restart level 4 without a chance to see or practice the other 3 levels. As I stated earlier, the first segment of level 4 was so difficult, I actually bought a new controller just to try to get past it for this review. First off, I tried using the standard 6-button controller, which I use for everything because it's a great controller. The problem is, when trying to move your target reticule to a specific point on the screen, fast, accuracy is a problem, and you'll tend to move it too far. So then I fell back to one of the original 3-button controllers, and I had forgotten how solid they were, even if a bit uncomfortable in the D-pad. This controller was more precise, but now I had a problem with the reticule moving not far enough. So then I pulled out the official turbo version of the 6-button, and I liked using it due to the turbo function, which helped a little, but the D-pad on it seemed to have issues switching between the X and Y axis. I don't know, maybe it just needed to be cleaned, but either way, it wasn't the answer either. So I picked up an 8-bit-do wireless Genesis controller, which I was avoiding previously for the reviews anyway, because I wanted to get a feel for what the game was like using the original equipment. But I may not go back. It's an absolute wonderful controller that works perfectly on the Genesis. Just feels great and does everything you need to do. No wires.
SATCOM requests immediate review.
Anyway, at first I got used to the controller, but it wasn't really helping. I'd still get about halfway through the first part of the level and get killed. But then as I used it more, I got better and was able to make it about 2/3 of the way through the level consistently. But no better than that. However, it was at this point that a throwaway tip from the manual actually came in handy. All the cameras have a shield that you raise up when you are working in a different area of the city, so that if enemies are attacking 2 areas at once, the camera you're not using won't take damage, or if it does, it'll take a long time for the shield to get destroyed first. The shield usually turns your view into a thick, cross-hatched view of the screen, and you can't see much. So normally, you would never have the shield up when going after the enemy. However, as the manual points out, if you're close to finishing a section, bring up the shield and shoot away and hope for the best, as you don't have to worry about hitting any humans in level 4. Using this method, I was able to finally get through that first section, only to find out the second and third sections were much easier. And I'd go so far as to say that even the final 4th section isn't quite as hard as the first one, although I had to use the same shield cheat to try to get through it. Also, keep in mind, the shield isn't a full cheat. It only takes about 8 shots or so before it's destroyed. So all it really does is just give you a few more chances to get to the next area. Well, I'm glad this was available in the game, because it actually proved to be a method to beat the game. It wasn't what I would call fun. Put simply, the game is too difficult. I probably spent way too long explaining why that is, but I shouldn't have to go with 4 controllers, one of which was released a full 25 years after this game, and quote-unquote cheat to win. Enough practice should have been enough. I understand they probably felt like that there wasn't much they could really do with a shooting gallery type game, but the first CD and the second CD almost feel like separate games, and if they'd managed to keep the end closer to what was on the first disc, I think this really would have been a much better game. Visually and sound-wise, there's not really much for me to say here. The video on the Sega CD is known as being a grainy mess in the best of circumstances, and nothing's really changed here. I like what they did with the design of the HUD in the game, and as I mentioned earlier, for the film segments, you can tell they had a bigger budget than what they had with Super Shark, but it's still somewhat hard to look at in 2019 initially. Although with a proper setup, your eyes will adjust as you play. I would have liked seeing this on a 30-bit system to compare, but unfortunately that just wasn't in the cards. All in all, I'm going to give Ground Zero Texas 2 stars. If I was just grading the game on the first half, this would easily be a 4-star game, as the first half was pretty fun and engaging. But things just become rote in the second half, and not only does the action become boring and repetitive, it's too freaking hard. It's really too bad. I hate to see a missed opportunity like this, and hopefully our next Sega CD review will finally get things back in the right direction. Okay, and that was Ground Zero Texas. I didn't know what to expect when I picked this one up, and was this close to being pleasantly surprised. Oh well, you can't win them all, even with the director of Brandon Lee's Rapid Fire behind you. Tune in next week as we turn the dial all the way back to 1987 and we take a look at the first soccer title to be released on the Master System. Or was it? In honor of the Women's World Cup currently going on. We'll see if this game is the United States or Thailand. And if you're watching this review not in June 2019, well, I guess you'll just have to research that reference. Until next time, remember, whatever you're playing, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.